SicEm365.com, the umbrella of where we are underneath of it, 365 Sports. You talk about this time of the year with who's going to be the defensive coordinator, a bowl game coming up, transfer portal, and then Grayson Grundhoefer as well when it comes to recruiting. National Signing Day next week. Grayson, is this Christmas a week early for you?
I would definitely say that, right? I mean, it's been a lot of fun over the past week or so. For this Baylor class, at least, a lot of drama as far as, some decommitments that have happened over the last week, and then the transfer portal really kind of gearing up, and you're starting to see just so many guys enter the portal. You're seeing Baylor be aggressive in the transfer portal after adding Campbell Barrington this week. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's great to track. Obviously, you'd like to see more good news than bad news. And so far, I think it's been kind of even for Baylor up to this point. So they're going to need to finish through this weekend really strong up until the dead period. And then, of course, signing day on Wednesday. It's going to be really important that this Baylor staff finishes and closes very strong.
Grayson, to this point, Baylor only has like 3 or 4 guys in the portal. And, Kyron Jones obviously went to Virginia Tech, and some other guys waiting for that offer or trying to find out where they're going to go. How much more do you expect it to fill up after the bowl game?
I do think it will fill up a little bit more. I don't think you're going to see a mass exodus. I'm not even sure what the number would be where you would say, wow, that's a mass exodus from the Baylor program. As in, I don't see it being in the 20s like it is at A&M. I think, and Oklahoma State for that matter. But I think for Baylor, they'll probably get around, I would guess it probably has to be somewhere around the number of like 8. Would be kind of what I would anticipate. They just need more room, and based on the numbers in the class and then just kind of what I think they're going to want to do in the transfer portal, I think they're going to kind of want it to be around that number. And I would say that's the other really important thing about it, right, is that, is Baylor losing guys that they don't want to lose, or is Baylor losing guys that they kind of need to leave so they can create more room to add transfers? I think there's a big distinction between those two things. And so I think Baylor's going to be more on the side of, hey, we need more spots so we can go out and add guys. And maybe, for some guys, this just wasn't the right fit for them, couldn't find playing time, or, just need to go find another spot to play more. But for the Baylor side of things, I think they've done a pretty nice job up to this point with retaining guys on their roster who they really need to compete going forward. And I think that's key.
So to be clear, just for clarification's sake, for anybody listening, 8 guys, not counting anybody right now, but 8 guys post-bowl game is what you're eyeing.
I think it'll be something around that, maybe a couple less. I don't think it'll be more than that, but it could be. You kind of never know with how those conversations go. And I know most of the guys had those conversations kind of right after the season. And so I think a lot of people expected that to be the massive attrition point. But I do think you'll see probably more than what you saw in this round enter the portal. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of ballparking here, but somewhere around, that 6 to 8 number just really wouldn't surprise me.
Grayson, so among the decommitments that they've had here lately, I mean, we talked about Calvin Clements, who turned around. He's from Lawrence, Kansas. Kansas is on a good roll right now, and so he committed to them. But most recently, you had Corey Huff Jr. just a couple of days ago, not a part of the class any longer. I'm sure there's, something to that and mutual decision and all that. But just with some of these decommitments, what are they telling you outside of Baylor needs some more room in terms of the guys that are no longer part, like a Corey Huff? Are they still in the market for a defensive back of his, caliber? Like, what does that say to you?
Right. So as far as the decommitments go, obviously they didn't want to lose Calvin Clements. They really liked him, young guy, but then they swapped that out by getting Campbell Barrington, who gives them a more established presence, a guy that will help them in the more immediate future. So I see that as kind of, honestly a win for Baylor, even though I think Calvin's going to be a really good player. I think that Campbell helps them more in the near future, and I think he can still be really, really good, especially since he's already like 22, 23 years old. Like, you don't find many guys like that in the transfer portal. Now, as far as the other two, Torian York, he decommitted earlier in the week, then got the offer from A&M. I know that Oklahoma, Florida, Auburn are all looking at him as well. He was another guy that Baylor didn't want to lose. They wanted him in this class. a local kid, a guy who'd been committed for a long time. And so sadly, he's going to end up elsewhere. But again, that gives you another spot to go out and add a transfer or go out and add another prospect. They put out an offer yesterday to Justin Horn, the linebacker out of John Curtis High School in Louisiana. He's a guy that probably won't sign with Baylor during the early signing period, but if he does wait till February, then Baylor has a chance. But that's still to be determined since Baylor got in so late with him because they had to wait on Torrey and York. So again, that one is another one where it's kind of like, that's a bummer they lost him. How are we going to use that spot to maybe address the position or maybe use it for another position as well? As far as Corey Huff goes, I think it's pretty obvious Baylor was going to take a transfer at safety. They're probably going to take 2 transfers at cornerback, regardless of what happened with Corey Huff. It was kind of one of those, it didn't matter. They needed older guys. They need guys who can help them next season. But as far as him specifically, mutual decision there. That's not one that I would consider a loss for Baylor, as in, they didn't necessarily not want that to happen, if that makes sense. There just were some things there that need to be addressed that weren't. And so therefore Baylor and Corey Huff decided to move on. And so that's kind of where things are at there. And like I just said, Baylor is still going to look to address the defensive back position, cornerback, and potentially safety as well in the transfer portal, and maybe in the 2023 class if they find the right prospect.
Grayson, Dave Aranda's name, it doesn't get brought up a lot. I mean, like some head coaches, and he's kind of got his own unique way about doing everything. But I did see your note about him visiting, which is the prized part of this entire class, with all due respect to everybody out and everyone else, in Austin Novacad. How critical, when is that meeting? How critical is that meeting? Is that to seal the deal or is that to save the deal?
Yeah, that will be tonight, I believe, or at least today at some point. Dave Aranda is going to have an in-home visit with he and his family. They've already had one earlier. And then, of course, Sean Bell was also at his game against Austin Vandegrift in that quarterfinal matchup. That, of course, Dripping Springs narrowly lost. And then Vandegrift, of course, is now in the state championship. So they were so close to being there. But this is more just about, Dave Aranda being there and Austin getting to talk to Dave again, his family getting to talk to Dave again, and really just getting to see the head coach again and getting to talk to him again. I don't think this is anything having to do with save the deal or anything like that. I think this is more just to, solidify things on both ends and just make sure that everyone is moving in the same direction, that this is the perfect fit. And ultimately, I think it will be. Austin's been committed for a long time now. And even when Ohio State and Texas A&M and, all these other schools tried to come in and tried to, get him to sway, he never did. And he remained committed to Baylor. And so I think that's going to happen again. I think this is just one of those things where head coaches, they go and visit all the commits pretty much. And so now it's just Austin's turn. It just happens to be right before the weekend. And so I'm expecting it to go really well again. And again, for Baylor to hold on to one of the best commits they have in the class and a guy who's a true difference maker at the quarterback position, which is something that is really, really hard to find.
Grayson, is there any specific player that we should be watching in the transfer portal right now?
Well, we've talked about a couple, I feel like. Of course, when you look at LSU transfer wide receiver Jack Besh, he's a guy who visited during the week on his official visit. He's a guy who played really well at LSU his freshman year, had a breakout as a freshman, and everyone was anticipating him to have a big season his sophomore year. But he dealt with some injuries in fall camp. They also, of course, had a coaching change with Brian Kelly coming in. And so you put all those variables together along with the talent at LSU, and he kind of just got, lost in the shuffle a little bit. He still played some, still had some good moments, especially late in the season. But it was clear it wasn't going to work out. And then, of course, when Keyshawn Butte decided that he was coming back to LSU for next season, it kind of just made sense for Jack to go ahead and move on to a place that will kind of feature him a little bit more. And he's a guy that's definitely on Baylor's radar. Baylor's looking to upgrade the wide receiver position. I mentioned it, and we've talked about it ad nauseum, but there just wasn't enough competition in that room last year. And so they're going to change that going into the 2023 season. And Besh would give them a really, really reliable wide receiver in the slot and a guy who can make contested catches across the middle of the field. So he would be a great pickup for them. There's a couple other receivers that they're looking at. I think one that, got offered this week and posted his offer was actually a D2 prospect, Isaac Tesla. And this kid is really just kind of jumped on the radar. And it's been really fun to watch him, gather offers and become a guy that was in D2, was offensive MVP and the GMAC and had a great year. And then you look at he's 6'4", 210, but you never really knew who he was until the offers started coming. And now everyone knows who he is. And so I think he's a guy who likely will visit Baylor in the near future, and a guy who Baylor's definitely looking at as well at the receiver position. And currently, I think they're probably going to take 2 wide receiver prospects if they can find the right 2 out of the transfer portal this year.
Grayson, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the weekend. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com. He also analyzes football, but also the recruiting guy. He